Good morning, everybody. We'll give just a couple more minutes for people to pop on. David, are you in New Zealand or where is that?
This is northern England. I'm sorry, southwestern England. Yeah, the countryside over near where Watership Down took place. It's
Yeah,
a nice little place.
nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I always like to see who has the best backgrounds. Fernando, that's a pretty sunset you have. Is that someplace from your house or where?
No, I used to live in Buffalo, and this is near in Pennsylvania, kind of a bit south.
Uh-huh.
It's called Presque Isle in Pennsylvania.
Nice. Great. Well, it's 2 minutes after, so why don't we get started? Good morning, everybody. It's really nice to see you, and thank you for joining the roundtable today. So this is our third, and I think we've had some really nice discussions before. Today, we're going to have a little more structure to what we're doing because we've got 3 guests who will tell us about data support services that are available on campus. And then we'll open it up for questions that anybody may have. And as far as questions go, usually we're a small enough group that you can just kind of unmute and ask your question. But you're also welcome to put it in the chat and we'll be sure to monitor that and make sure that everybody's questions get answered. So I think, before we start though, does anybody have any exciting news they want to share with the group here? Anything good happen? Get a paper published, get a grant, something good happen in your family? Don't be shy. Come on, somebody got a paper published. Anything? Worked out a hairy problem in the lab? No, I have. Okay, fine. I'll start. One of my students figured out we've got a scanning system for our endoscope, and we were trying to figure out the weird behavior we were getting with it. And one of my students delved into it enough that I think we found something that hasn't been published in the mechanical engineering literature before, which is pretty amazing considering none of us are mechanical engineers. So that's fun. So we're getting a paper accepted on that. Anybody else?
We just submitted a $10 million 30-page grant, and we may or may not get it, but I'm just happy it's done. So that's a victory, I think.
Absolutely. Congratulations. Yeah. I mean, I think you learn a lot putting those together too, right? So even if that one doesn't get funded, hopefully something will come out of that eventually. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started then. So we've got 3 guests. So Blake Joyce is the Assistant Director of Research Computing. Fernando Rios is Assistant Specialist in Research Data Management, and David Lebauer is Director of Data Sciences for CALS, the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. So Blake, Fernando, and David, if we could just have you go in order, could you maybe just spend a couple minutes, not long, just kind of giving an overview of what you do and what kind of services you might have available, and then we'll open it up for questions. So Blake, you first.
Thank you. So research computing, essentially, it's housed in UITS, but all of our stakeholders are RII and every researcher on campus. And it's right there in the name. We help researchers with computing, but specifically, we run the HPC systems, the high performance computers for the university. We're in charge of we're starting to become in charge of doing controlled data. So we have a pilot HIPAA program, both for computing and storage that we're starting to roll out now. We have been doing ITAR and DoD type controlled data, as well as other controlled unclassified information or CUI kinds of data. I also have consultants that can help with computing, specifically HPC computing. We help people with cloud computing as well. I'm a member of Jetstream, which is one of the Exceed machines, and I sit on the Exceed panel, which is all the nation's supercomputers. So I help to broker deals between the university and Exceed and help researchers move out to those larger resources from our resources here on campus. We also have stats consulting, specifically for doing fairly large statistical analysis and experimental design, both with HBC and just generally. Mohammed and Mark are my consultants there. And I also do data and visualization. So we have consultants that can help with large scale data manipulation, cleanup, that sort of thing, but also advanced visualizations. So interactive visualizations, web-based visualizations, you name it. So we do a little bit of everything. And what's nice about being in UITS is that we are department agnostic, or that's my preferred term. And the university pays our salary to help researchers, and it's this virtuous cycle. We help researchers, they do great research, they go get grants, the university gets money back. So we're not free. I like the term prepaid by the university, but it's free to you. So there's no reason not to hang out with us. And because we're department agnostic, we literally help everybody. We had 964 active users from 100 different departments on the HPC systems last year, the last fiscal year. Before that, it was 64 departments and 800 users, thereabouts. So we're growing pretty fast. We have a new HPC machine, and I work a ton with other department agnostic groups like Fernando and Otis in the libraries, and lots of other groups around campus like David, Gustavo.
Great, thank you so much, Blake. Fernando?
Great, thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, so like Blake mentioned, the libraries are also a department agnostic unit serving all of campus. So what I do is, or what we do in the Office of Digital Innovation and Stewardship in the library is part of our portfolio is providing data management support for campus. So what that entails is are several different areas really. The first that I want to talk about is we provide a consulting support for data management. So we often help people with writing data management plans. I'm sure you've all had to write one at some point when submitting a grant. I think you'll probably see more of us in your sphere in the coming year or two, because the NIH recently released some new data management planning requirements that'll come into force in 2023. So you'll probably hear from myself and from Blake in relation to some of their data management requirements that they've put forth. We also do a lot of training. I think some of you have seen some of the workshops that we offer throughout the year. The other big part is we provide support for several data management related platforms on campus. So those are the data management planning tool, which relates to, as you can probably guess from the name, data management planning for grants. So what that tool is it helps people write data management plans for specific funders by providing templates for those funders that try to follow what the specific funder has laid out as requirements. We support the Open Science Framework. This is a tool for active research that helps people collaborate and organize and manage their research projects. The big draw there is that it links to 10, 12 different storage systems, including U of A's Google Drive, U of A's Box, and it also links up to our new data repository. So that's kind of the third platform that we support. The repository is called Redata, and it's intended to support the publication of data sets in support of funder or publisher mandates for data sharing. So this is an archival grade data repository. It's not like a Google Drive. It's more of a steady state, shareable repository that meets all funder and journal requirements. And you can get a DOI for all your data sets there. The last thing I want to highlight is our website, which basically says everything I just said. I'll put that in the chat. I also have a flyer that I think you'll get sent later on, maybe after the meeting here, that kind of summarizes also everything I just said. And yeah, there's a big button at the top to subscribe to our newsletter. That's if you want to stay up to speed on what's going on in data management, events, workshops, news. Feel free to sign up.
Great. Yeah, I was just looking at it. It looks like there's a lot of information on that website. So thank you. David.
Oh, yeah, thanks. So my name is David Lebauer. As Jennifer already introduced me, I guess I'm Director of Data Science for the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. I've been here for about 2.5 years now. And the reason that I was hired was to enable data intensive research across the college. And so I have worked with Fernando and Blake quite a bit. One of the key differences between the types of services that we provide and what they provide is we're more domain specific, and we also have the opportunity to get more deeply involved with specific projects. So when we work with people, we're more heavily on the side of, having a developer or a scientific programmer who can work with the project for months on end and provide technical support, and as well as having really specific domain understanding. So to back up, and I'll introduce my group and just say that we've got 4 full-time developers. There are 2 software engineers who kind of work on automation and scaling up to high performance computing. We have 2 PhD research programmers, both with backgrounds in ecology, one with the background in ecology and one with the background in ecophysiology, and strong backgrounds in statistics, as well as using data sets that are domain specific. So earth science data sets and ecosystem and ecology data sets such as NEON, weather data, and etc. So we can help people get these data, put them in the format that they need for their particular analysis, and make use of them. We're all very interested in, I mean, we shared with Blake and Fernando and a number of people on campus. I do want to say that having been around to many different universities, this University of Arizona really has a great community interested in open science, and we're all really pushing that, making data and code available for people to reuse. We all really see the value in this. So, but that's not the lecture I'm here to give today. But I want to say, please take advantage of our support if you want to make your work not only useful to your scientific community, but also easier to use within your own group. And let's see. So now I want to give a quick overview of some of the specific projects that we've been working on. One of the big ones that I came here working on was the TerraRef project, which is many of you all may be familiar with. Up in Maricopa, there's this big robot scanner that scans the fields. That's a project that I've been working on since about 2015, and I came here. We moved the entire pipeline to Cyverse, and now Eric Lyons has taken over that project. I've been working on taking a lot of that infrastructure and generalizing it so that it can be used for drones and other Internet of Things platforms. So that's all about remote sensing and gathering data in the agricultural domain. We've also done relatedly work with simulation models, so predicting crop and ecosystem functions. And we're trying to make it, not just for specific projects, but as we develop pipelines for specific projects, making those general so that these pipelines are accessible not only to the community within the University of Arizona, but within the larger research community. So I think with that, I'll just summarize by saying, contact me if you have questions. We have, as I mentioned, kind of a lot of different layers of ways in which we can engage, from just kind of consulting and talking through your problems and giving you ideas, and in many cases, helping you find resources such as the library or UITS, to having, we can provide like a week or 2 of developer support just out of our core funding. And beyond that, if you need support for a specific project, we have the time that we can carve out of people in our group to help you implement a pipeline or publish a data set or software or do a statistical analysis. So with that, I really appreciate the opportunity to introduce our group. Thanks.
Great. Well, let's open it up for questions now. So maybe I'll start with a theme on this. So what are your data needs right now? And how can maybe these three folks or maybe other people that they know help you with that? People have questions or want to just say what their needs are.
Yeah, so actually, I have a question for Fernando. I'm Giovanni. I'm in nutritional sciences, and I've used a program in the past called VOS Viewer, and it's a way to actually use text-based search or some text mining to connect concepts. And so one of the things that I would find really useful, my data needs, are to try to see what's out there in the literature and within abstracts or within sometimes they mine some of the publications and actually connect people up through a network based upon these terms. And I'm wondering, I saw some software at the University of Chicago years ago where they were using something called the circus plot, which people are, or circus diagram, which people are probably familiar with, but I haven't been able to do that sort of thing at the university. And I'd like to, look at the neighbors, my research, people I might not know. So if there's a fast way to do that or a system in place that would allow us to, connect to people who we don't know, just, on the basis of the data that's been published in, I don't know, any of the NCBI, let's say, is that possible? Do we have a system to do that?
We don't have a system, I think, in that sense. I know there's a couple of researchers in computer science that have been trying to do that kind of mapping. Yeah, thanks, Blake. That's the one I was thinking of. That have been trying to do that kind of mapping, trying to connect to people in different disciplines. There is a database actually called Pure. It's from Elsevier. The UA subscribes to that product that tries to connect researchers in different disciplines, in similar disciplines. You can do searches based on what people have been researching. I don't know if that exactly is what you're looking for, but it sounds like it could help.
I saw something that was a dynamic thing with nodes, and actually you could use different search terms. It did like a word cloud, and based upon the word cloud, it put people together, and you could actually, see the distance between people. So it was in, it was like a scalar. Actually, it was like a vector. Actually, not a scalar. It was like a vector.
Yeah, I can show you that, John, if you like. Let me share my screen, or can I share my screen? I think someone has to let me do that, but there's this thing called KMap. It was put together by Iqbal, and the link's there in the chat.
Great.
Iqbal Hussein has worked in a number of groups across campus, but he works with Nirav and I quite a lot. And I think what you're describing. There's a lot of different modes that you can look at, but I just, I typed in your name and you can see like who your collaborators are across different disciplines. But you can also click on, hopefully I'm not going to make anyone seasick here. I'll do this slowly. But you can click on your other collaborators and see their connections as well.
Yeah.
And this is a tool that's really useful in a couple of ways. I use it a lot when I'm putting grants together and putting teams together, because there's also a knowledge base analysis that you can do for key terms. So a lot of times people are like, who does machine learning? And I know a few people because we work with a little bit of everybody across campus. But you can also identify a lot of the people who are beginning researchers and other kinds of folks who are just starting to get their name out there, or new PIs or postdocs and those sort of things. And this all is tracked off of publications like you're talking about.
Yeah, perfect.
Also, all the internal grant information. We're going to be overlaying all of the services we provide from the HBC on this, and this is part of why I work with Iqbal right now. And, you have to do a little bit of exploring and playing around, but it's pretty interesting. And in a group like BIO5, this would be especially interesting because you can see these connections outside of your domain. of expertise and outside of your college even. And Iqbal is working on ways to actually do the network analysis to demonstrate that you are an interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary person, and basically statistically show I do a lot of work outside of my college and I can prove it. And that's useful for grant writing as well as other sort of things.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
I was also going to mention the university is looking at a program called Academic Analytics that I think does something in this area as well. Jennifer's had a chance to look at that a little bit, so maybe she can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's it will do some of the same things that the KMAP will do, but
Thank
a
you.
little bit still in development, but it will be based on what you put into your UAVT, which will be the nice thing about it.
Yeah. Robbie McPherson runs the UAVT development, and she's been working with UAIR. So I would also point you to UAIR, that's the University of Arizona Institutional Research Group. They have a number of data scientists that can help you answer questions if you want to look at, if you need information about the university and or your department or your impact and things like that. And they're extremely helpful. They've hired a bunch of consultants in the last year because they want to move towards supporting both researchers and administrative kind of like data-driven decision making. And they have a number of ways to do that as well. So somewhere between those three things, I think you'll find anything you may need.
Thank you.
Blake, how are, so I might have missed this. How are the data in KMAP populated? How is the information in that draws those questions? And sorry if I missed it first time.
Oh, no, sorry. I don't know if I want to dig in or whatever, but essentially Iqbal there's two major sources of data he pulls. He goes to ISI, the Knowledge Web, which is publications. He goes to PubMed, pulls all those publications. But then he also we have a data warehouse that is all of the institutional information. It contains all the financial information for the university, all the SPS, grants and contracts kind of stuff. It also has a lot of publications when they're put through UAVT. And so he pulls all of that information, basically scrapes it all out. And that's how the keyword term search works, is it goes through all of your publication abstracts and corpora and pulls out like expertise based off of terminology. There's a dictionary basically of terminology for expertise that was developed. And he uses that to basically assign expertise to people based off of their publications and their author ranking, things like that. So it pulls a bunch of information from a bunch of different places. So that's why he and I work together, because it's a lot of stuff to process, as you may imagine. But
yeah, no, that was a good, thank you. That was a good 30,000 foot overview.
Yeah.
We want to get into the weeds.
Yeah, if you want to get into the weeds, I'm happy to do that, obviously. I'm kind of a talker, so I'm going to stop.
All right, other questions? What other needs do you have?
So Fernando, you mentioned the open science framework, and I think you mentioned getting DOIs for publishing your raw data or putting your raw data out there. And I suppose the question I have is how do you go about doing that? I mean, the line question to that is, a DOI we sort of highlight as an important element in our science. A peer-reviewed publication gets a DOI has some value. Obviously, publishing raw data wouldn't necessarily gather the same value, but I think it's still a really good thing to do as a token incentive to promote open science, right? So getting your data out in a DOI. So I guess the question is, how do you go about doing that?
Well, I'll talk about that in the context of Redata, our data repository. So actually, let me throw a link in there so you can kind of see what I'm talking about as I say stuff. So this is a service that we actually just launched this fall, and it's really intended, to fill that need of publishing data in a way that is compliant. So one of the things that that we do to kind of address that issue of publishing raw data that might not necessarily be always useful is we do have well, let me back up a little bit. So the way this works is you have a data set that you need to publish. You go to this repository, you log in, you upload your data set, and then it undergoes when you hit the button to publish, it undergoes a review, curatorial review that's done by our team to really make sure that the data and documentation and metadata really meets kind of a bare minimum standard, so that when it's published, it's useful for other people. It's not just a data dump, right? So in that way, anything that in our repository that has a DOI, and you can click on some of the entries that are in there already, you can see that we do have a minimum level of information. All the deposits have README files that are checked. The other aspect to checking is compliance. So one of the things that we tell people is that yeah, there are third-party repositories out there. You might have heard of things like Dryad or Zenodo, for example. The one thing that we do try to provide with Redata is help people comply with university policies as well. So you may or may not be aware that the university does have data retention policies that comes out of research. So by depositing here, you can meet those policies. If you do any sort of research with human subjects or animals, for example, we do connect with the appropriate offices to make sure the I's are dotted and T's are crossed when it comes to making sure that it's okay to make that publicly available. And in that way, it reduces the risk to you, right, to share data to comply with these mandates. Does that kind of get at your question?
Yeah, you actually the heart of the question better than I asked it, which was depositing through your system as opposed to Dryad or the other. Well, that's the most common one that I'm familiar with, but there's certainly the advantages of going through the university system. I like that. So thank you.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind, I mean, I didn't realize I was off mute, and I audibly chuckled. And I wanted to give a little explanation for that. And that is because what your comment about data and the amount of credit people get for it. So I've spent a lot of my time doing meta-analysis as a researcher and going into people's papers and trying to extract the raw data out of figures and tables and things of that nature. And so I'm a little bit biased, but my perspective on what a paper is, it's not only my perspective. I found other people to corroborate this idea, but it's this is an advertisement for an idea and a scientific finding. But to me, the true value of this of the information in a paper is in the data itself. And so when a paper, which historically really has been, most papers don't provide the underlying data, is presented, you're only getting one perspective of that. And then if you're doing a meta-analysis, you may not even care about that researcher's particular question. You might want to look at the data in a different way, not the interaction effects or whatever they're looking at. And so there is a lot of value to publishing the data. So on one hand, yeah, the bar has been lowered. Something like Zenodo or OSF, you can generate a DOI without having any, there's no requirements for generating a DOI and getting a citation for any object that you put out there. And then there's like this next level, like what they provide at the university, not just compliance, but also helping to put appropriate metadata to make sure that it's findable. And then you can make a data product that's very useful for the research community. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to say, well, we can help you do that. And also, I hope that the people here, especially faculty who are reviewing other people's tenure cases and et cetera, help to promote this culture of valuing data products as well as software products as eligible and important contributions to science. So that's kind of a little bit of my soapbox. And yeah. Thanks.
I think one of the things I like about what you guys have described as doing is one of the challenges I have found with public depository of raw data is just that it is curated in a non-structured way, and garnering data that are usable from those repositories is almost as difficult as going in and trying to pull out data from figures in publications where the raw data aren't presented. And so the idea that, Fernando, you mentioned having a team that curate data so that it meets some, say, I chuckled at minimal standards, provides the, the way it's the next adaptation of the idea of making data publicly available and making things open source in a way that people, like David, could actually use when you want to go in and do meta-analysis. So yeah.
So I just wanted to say, are people familiar with the dbGaP on this call? I don't know if people have used this repository at the NIH, but I was involved in the first project for the dbGaP, and it's basically an open source phenotype and genotype database that the NIH started to put together about 2010. And we started with a standardized protocol. For every data set that was submitted, we needed a code book with sufficient detail, and they started the right way. And it hasn't been completely successful, but it is certainly possible, large scale data sets. And I can say that, speaking from experience, people have a data dictionary or code book, whatever you want to call it. If there are standards for doing this in place, and one of the requirements for submitting to the repository is that you adhere to these provisions, I do believe that it can be used. There have been probably 300 publications based upon these publicly accessible, this particular data set. So it is all possible, but yeah, just to let you know.
Yeah, actually, that's an interesting thing to bring up too, John Paul, because we've seen the dbGaP data sets show up in lots of places, and we're working with IRB and other groups on campus to help shore up the process and make it easier for researchers to actually pull that and put it in the right place and compute on it. And so that's actually an ongoing project that we have, and the medical campus or health sciences funded us recently to do that. And so hopefully in the next year, we'll have a process that's way more streamlined, both for the data use agreement that you have to sign for dbGaP, but also on our side to show dbGaP, we have compliance ready, we have controls, we can match all this stuff, and then coordinating those 3 or 4 groups on campus and externally. They're pretty serious about their data use agreement, so we've had to pause a few research programs. They kind of lost in the void between IRB, departmental IT, and us at UITS. But we're on shoring that up, and that's
there's a data use committee and there's a data access committee. So ours was the vanguard. So I was involved in creating this, and it worked really well for the first 100. But now, we just had some data posted, and I mean, there are, I don't know, I think there are over like 10,000 data sets in there now. And is it data use? Is it data access? I think all of these committees that need to review this stuff has really caused a bottleneck. And so hopefully they'll streamline it. I hope that works. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions? So maybe I could, let me just ask one question first. So Fernando, you mentioned there are templates available for putting together data management plans. Could you lead us through that a little bit? And which agencies do we need to be worried about now? I know NSF kind of led the pack, right? But who's coming along next?
Yeah, so if you go to the website, our website, I'm going to throw the link up there again. If you scroll down a little bit in that first box where it says I'm getting started / writing a proposal, there's a link to the DMP tool. So this is a tool that I mentioned that has a lot of templates for different funders. And yeah, you're right. The NSF did lead the charge, so to speak, and that's kind of reflected in the DMP tool. So a lot of the templates, NSF has templates. So the DMP tool has templates for NSF and all the subdirectorates. So it's very detailed. Not every funder is like that in DMP tool. But the one to watch out for, I think, coming up is the NIH. So I think just in October, they released their long-awaited revisions to their data management, data sharing plan. So before it was that you only needed to include a data sharing plan if you're submitting a proposal above, I think, $500,000. Now it's going to be every proposal is going to have a 2-page data management plan, much like the NSF. And because the NSF one has been around for so long already, I think the NIH did a really good job of implementing some of the lessons learned from the NSF. So they've really done a good job, I think, of including things like, well, obviously, you know, dealing with human subjects data introduces a huge number of complexities, but also things like, you know, better working with tribes and their information. So I think there's going to be a lot of extra things to watch out for when that comes into force in 2023. So we'll be working a lot with people like Blake and human subjects and IRB to kind of build up a support structure for the U of A before those requirements come into play.
Great, thank you very much. You know, we have a question from John Paul about Redcap, and I see that has put in some more information about that. Shripad, would you mind unmuting and answering that a little bit more fully?
Yeah, I just know about this service. This is Shripad Sinari. I work in the statistical consulting lab at BIO5, and it's part of the Center for Bioinformatics, Bioinformatics and Biostatistics at the University of Arizona Health Sciences Center. And part of that group is involved in managing and administrating Redcap databases and helping out people with training and so forth as well.
And so for people who might know,
note,
I was just going to ask what,
yeah.
Maybe explain what Redcap is, because not everybody may know.
So I'm not an expert on Redcap either, but Redcap is basically a sort of a form-based database that you can use to capture information for a project. And I think typically it's administered in a HIPAA compliant way.
Yes.
I just had a question for Blake in regards to the IRB related stuff. Is there a way for when you're submitting, for example, genomics data or data with very diverse set of information in there, like clinical data plus genomics data and so forth? Is there a way between Fernando and Blake that we can use your services to sort of process the data as it comes along? I'm talking of, let's say, the data acquisition is over a period of several years rather than just one cross-sectional data as well. Thank you.
Good to see you, Shripad. I missed running into you at the building, but yeah, that's a great question. And so it's a bit complicated because I think what you're asking for is a combination of things. The lay of the land for control data, specifically for both clinical and for human identifiable data, genomics and clinical trials, is there's an honest broker. And I know of two, Vignesh Subian. Subian is he's an engineer, but he's also like an informaticist, basically medical informaticist. And Vern is the other one that I'm aware of. So there's this weird triad between Banner running their data repository for all of their information from the hospital. There's the Redcap, as you point out, is where all the clinical data tends to go. It is obviously blown up in the last year with all the COVID stuff we've been doing, and that system was never really designed to be a large scale data repository. It was a server that got set up, basically. So there's a couple of things it's sort of a Gordian knot, and there's a few things we have to pull apart. But basically, the health sciences has funded us, and Ryan Deitman is running this, is spearheading this effort on the UITS side for all the controlled information. And basically, we have ways to actually do active computing and storage of data. We're looking at ways to store data for medium term, 1 to 5 years. We don't have a way to do long-term storage of data forever that is HIPAA controlled or other kinds of controlled. And so regrettably, data storage forever is a tough thing. But what we have also on our roadmap for the medium term kind of storage as well as the short term is basically de-identification services. These are done often by Vern or by Vignish or some other honest broker. Right now, we're trying to figure out a way that can be automated or at least partially automated so that it's not such a monumental task. And we're also looking at the way that data actually gets moved. Currently, the state of the art is CDs. And I want to, raise your hands if you still have a CD drive on your computer. Yeah, right. Like, okay, cool. There's 2 other people. I thought I was the only one. So we're also looking at basically data distribution models for end-to-end encrypted data transfer from these sources as well. So somewhere between those 3 efforts, I think we'll be able to solve what you're talking about in the short term, because you'll develop data that's human identifiable and either transfer it, de-identify it on a central service, and then push that out somewhere into the world where it can be used because it's not controlled anymore. Or it'll be transferred, as you're saying, as you're developing it, to some central location that is safe for HIPAA data. You'll develop that data over a course of multiple years. And then when you're ready and you say, okay, here's my data set, I'm gonna publish on this, that becomes either de-identified at that point and transferred out, or that's when we have to figure out, like, where do we put this for the long term? And that one little piece there, the long-term repository, isn't quite clear. NIH is looking at ways to have national repositories for this kind of data, but those efforts take a lot of time, and I honestly don't know what that'll look like whenever it's done. Hopefully that kind of answers. That's a lot of
Yeah,
things.
and my question, one other part of that question was also in regards to sort of a continuous deposition of the data, in the sense, like, as the data is coming in, you're depositing it, but you're verifying, like what Fernando said, if there's a template. But if there's human being involved in between, the validation and the process may take a little bit longer than usual. And so the question is there sort of a way for continuous deposition to take place as well?
Yeah, that's that database that we're talking about. It would be a central one, probably housed in health sciences data center. And it would be, end-to-end encrypted from you developing it and pushing it in. It'll probably be a little like the Cyverse data store, if you've ever played with that, where, a user basically pushes their data up, it goes onto a server that's, well, we have that one, but it goes onto the server and you can continuously push that data. And because now you don't have to have a human involved, it's end-to-end encrypted and it meets all the regulations for HIPAA, you just push it and it'll just push, instead of having to, like, carry it on a stick or carry it on a CD and go in and do that. So that first step to unwind for us is the data transfers. And I think that'll solve what you're asking.
Yeah, no, Blake, I'm not just talking about pushing the raw data, but pushing the data in the sense that Fernando was talking about, in terms of minimal compliance with minimal information, like something like MAQC or dbGaP that John had talked about, with minimal information, so that it is compliant with external data standards.
Yeah, that's what that area where you would be able to put data, and it would have HIPAA compliance. So that would most likely meet most other data use agreement requirements. And it's also part of why we started to dig into each of these groups, because there's tons of groups out there that provide data and then require compliance of some type or another. And so for, like, dbGaP, we're focusing a lot of effort on understanding what they need. How do we make an environment that is already out of the box ready for that sort of thing? and that will be added into that kind of central repository where people can put data. And that's what Health Sciences is funding us to do. So I think we're talking about the same thing. I'm just not doing a good job of describing.
Yeah. So Sherpad, one of the things I was thinking when you mentioned this is, we're developing some point of care devices. These are teleconnected, and I thought you were talking about longitudinal data, but I guess they're just sort of a series of cross-sectional studies. But do we have the capacity, Blake, to set something up? I'm writing these protocols right now that are talking about using this retinal imager that's teleconnected, that goes to a central repository. There's a reading center. Do we have capacity at the university to do that sort of thing, like a continuous data collection from a point of care device? I mean, that must be like terabytes or petabytes of data.
Yeah, we don't, that I'm aware of. And the other complication there is the point of care is not on the roadmap. That involves human lives and well-being, and that's beyond the scope of what they funded us to do. And that sort of thing takes millions of dollars to do, and we are not getting that funding. So the point of care is complicated, and we do process terabytes of data continuously from groups like the Maricopa Ag, the gantry that's out in Maricopa, from all the telescopes that come off of, I think we have 13 in just the kind of Tucson greater area, not to mention all the ones around the world that we help with the Event Horizon. So the ability to do continuous analysis and data handling is becoming solid, but point of care is very, very tricky, because if there's anything that breaks in that, then somebody's well-being is on the line, and that opens us up for a lot of legal implications, as you may imagine. So that's just not, the Health Sciences hasn't expressed any interest in going that far, and they've been specific about that's not in the scope. And maybe they might have some other groups working on that, but that wouldn't be us.
So this is Shripad again, and this may be answered by David or Blake, either one. Is there templates available for us to sort of adapt from the Maricopa project or the astronomy project, so that we can use them as sort of templates for our projects? Has it been documented somewhere, Blake or David?
So are you talking about like setting up a pipeline for processing imagery data, or?
Yeah, adapting that sort of pipeline more for genomics and integration of genomics and clinical data, so that at the end of the day, it is ready for publication or ready for pushing to external repositories.
So I'm not qualified to speak about genomics pipelines in particular, but we can generally help to automate pipelines that you currently have. That's one of the things that we're working on. One is kind of automating existing pipelines so that they can be scalable. And then the other is adding on, both in the beginning and at the end. One is to collect the required metadata to make it useful, and automating as much as possible the entire process, so that by the time you're ready to publish, you already have an object that carries all the metadata that's been involved in the processing. So that's kind of a very high level generic idea, but for a specific pipeline, we'd have to discuss, because each domain has its own needs. I think that what we have would adapt very well for a lot of Internet of Things and imagery and remote sensing types of devices, meteorology, etc. But my expertise ends when we get within the cell and into the genes. So I'll defer to Blake, who does have that expertise.
Yeah, so Michele and Emmanuel are the two grad students that are running the actual analysis pipeline from the Maricopa project. And I know that they're going to publish that information, and I have seen their code and their workflows. If that's kind of what you're looking for, Shripad.
Yeah, if there's sort of a templated version of that, giving an overview, that would be great. Like,
along those lines,
the QC pipeline, collect this.
But I mean, if you guys, sorry, if you guys can set up Jupyter type notebooks, I don't know if that's a possibility to do that because
We
something.
have those running on the HPC and in other environments. Actually, along those lines, Shripad, if you're interested, I have a graduate student, Satish Perry. He has worked on just what you're describing. He has SnakeMake and Nextflow running in the Jupyter Notebook on the HPC. And I'd be happy to get you in contact with him if you'll send me an email to remind me. End of the year is always a crazy time. But
Yeah.
we are really interested going forward, at least in my group. We have a lot of people who are sysadmins and do the cyber infrastructure side of things. We have a lot of people who are researcher backgrounds like me that do all the consulting side to help bridge the gap between researchers and the hardware. What we don't really have right now is research software engineers that help to bridge the software and workflows and efficiency and reproducibility kind of things with the scientists like us and the consultants and the researchers and the cyber infrastructure professionals. So I actually see this whole thing as kind of a triangle of three groups of people. And so Satish is kind of one of our first like sort of software, research software engineers that we've hired. And that's on a training grant. So he'll be really excited to work with somebody.
Yeah, so I'm interested in basically looking at the pipeline workflow using something like Nextflow with Singularity containers. And
that's exactly what I'm talking about. So if you'll send me an email, I'll get you introduced to Satish. He'll be excited to have not a guinea pig, the first person to work with and
Sure.
try to do some of these things.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I would it's great session discussion. Glad to know we have such good resources in our field. By the way, I'm in Zombini, I'm in orthopedic surgery department. We do musculoskeletal related research, particularly with, I want to bring up the imaging aspect. So in our field, biomechanics, I have seen a very successful story like what we're talking about from Stanford. They have established a musculoskeletal model and is shared with imaging and with structural or the mechanical properties that is used all over the world. Has been a very successful story and been heavily supported by the NIH. So following that, I'm thinking about what we are talking here is we may have a good opportunity about the imaging related, particularly geared towards research. So in imaging radiology, we do have a good system like a PAC system, but it's more for patient care. So if we can do something project specific, for example, the research we are doing for carpal tunnel syndrome, we collect a lot of images using ultrasound and use CT. And I thought if we have the special area of research, we can start to talk about archiving and the data sharing. And we actually now also writing an NIH proposal. I thought maybe also great to even build a specific MA into that. In addition to the research question we are addressing now, if we archive all the great data as a product of this research, could it be open up for a lot of future research projects for ourselves and for other people, or other people in the country, they can join force with us with the network of data sharing. As far as I know, we have a lot of people now interested in doing ultrasound. So it's a massive data being collected and wasted. So if we have a good pipeline, people collect the data and route into a University of Arizona central system, I think that has a huge impact. And for not only for our own research, also for really to contribute to the wide spread into the country and the world. So that's a big aligning very well with what we are doing, the big data and for research development. So that's why I'm interested in perhaps to discuss more with you for the proposal we are writing, could build some additional specific aim. which probably very well viewed by NIH. So we are utilizing the effort, the resources we have for much larger benefit.
Yeah, actually, I'd be really interested in that as well, and I'd be happy to talk to you anytime. Just reach out and we'll set up some time to sit down. I do a lot of grant support writing as well, even though that's not exactly my job description. But it's interesting you bring that up. We work with Diane Patterson, and she does brain scans, and we've been working with her to do 3D models, but also fourth dimensional. So over time, changes in brain scans, in response to certain stimuli, and then visualizing that. So an entire, cytoskeletal muscular kind of a model would be kind of the next try. That'd be like the next step up to do that. And of course, Gustavo and Wynn Burleson have some expertise in motion capture and other things. So I know you're doing CT and you're doing, ultrasound maybe, but there's also, we could probably include some of this other stuff to give us these models. I will say what we don't have is a really great place to store 3D models right now, and other kinds of, and that remains an issue, and that's something to consider. And so if you're writing a grant, that might be something that we try to tease apart and figure out. That seems pretty interesting. And my dad's a chiropractor, so biomechanics is like my thing. So if I'm personally interested in that as well. So please reach out. I'd be happy to chat with you in your lab at any time.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk, because currently when we submit data management plan, I feel it's more like a routine, superficial. Okay, we will publish or archive some data available for people upon request. But what we're talking here is about much larger scale, systematic way of building a database that is specialized to certain area in the clinical application. So that is very exciting.
Yeah, I wanted to say I'm also interested in that as well. That's one of the things my group is working on is something analogous, but for drone data and agricultural field trials. But I mean, a lot of the basics will apply, but the idea is that a lot of people are generating basically the same type of very high value and very useful data. So can we, put it in a centralized place and or enable people to standardize it so that even if it's stored in multiple different locations, it can still be aggregated for synthetic analyses. So
yeah, because this is something we need your help, because we archive data also in some way, but oftentimes it's not scalable, not sustainable. We spend a lot of effort in the end, kind of died out, right? So if you have a system, we can make it sustain and also can scale up in complexity. And as we build, but that is really the effort we want to spend on, which you have the expertise for helping us doing that.
Well, thank you. It's been a great discussion today. I want to thank our guests again for being here, and for all I've heard a couple of ideas that they've sparked. I hope we have some specific great things that come out of this, and that everybody will keep these ideas in mind and visit the websites. This has been recorded, so we'll send out the information on that. I want to remind you all, if you have any requests for things that we should cover at these types of roundtables, please just send them to myself or to Amy. And this year, unfortunately, we're not going to have our great BIO5 mixer, which has always been a highlight of the year for myself, even before I was in BIO5 administration. We will have a short virtual toast next Thursday, the 17th at 4:30. So I hope you all can just log on and at least say hi to everybody in the chat and things like that. And otherwise, I wish you all the best December. Happy holidays to everybody. It's great to see you. Take care. We'll see you at the next one. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
yeah, thanks for having all of us. That was great.
Really, really interesting to hear about what you're doing.